You're listening to The Seed. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Julie Staley, and Laura Yar, our co-host, is not here today. She's taking a little break for COVID-related safety measures. So we wish her well and hope that everything will be fine. She's just going to take a little break just to be safe for things. But we are here with a very, very special edition of The Seed. I'm here at the Staley Museum, and with me is Randy Garner, Reverend Randy Garner actually, you grew up in North Carolina. Yes. And you are living in Virginia at this point. But the tie that you have to A.E. Staley is really, really remarkable. And what we're talking about here on our podcast is the life of A.E. Staley in relation to our documentary Fields of Gold that we're producing for Spencer Films. And you grew up on the farm that A.E. Staley was born and raised on, and you still own a piece of that land. So you really have an insight into his life and his story. And this is your first visit to Decatur, so you have to tell me what it's been like to be here.
It's been wonderful. It's been way beyond any expectations that I would have had, Julie. I have really been honored and humbled to be here. I'm glad I've got some of A.E. Staley's DNA. I think maybe, I don't know if that gave me special treatment around here or not, but I am telling you, you guys have been wonderful. And to see the museum has been phenomenal. To see from North Carolina to Decatur is a little bit of a journey, and to have heard about it, but to now get to experience, it's been wonderful.
We have really enjoyed having you for many, many reasons, but really to be able to get that perspective of what it was like growing up on that farm, because that is what motivated A.E. Staley to do what he did and be who he was. He wanted to do something bigger. He saw something bigger for himself. So is that, can you see where he was, what he was coming from? You lived that.
Probably a lot of people that have been on a farm growing up. There's jokes about preachers getting into the ministry. They got to the end of the field plowing and looked up and said they thought the Lord was calling them to the ministry. Well, A.E. Staley, probably on that farm, as difficult as it was back in the day when he was coming along, knew that there was greater things out there. There was more opportunities out there for him. And so he was chasing his dream, a dream that he had that probably no other people had, but he was after that. And so that's what probably motivated him to look for the opportunities in other places.
Yeah, he really always seemed to be a very outgoing person, was very inquisitive about things, wanted to learn more, and did feel some kind of a calling outside of the farm. We know from our history here at the museum that his father originally really wanted him to be a minister, which you probably have felt.
There's a few generations removed, but maybe his father finally got his wish.
Exactly. Yeah. So you did go into the ministry, and how long have you been doing that?
40 years, just about. It's been quite a while. Full time, about 35, I suppose. Church I'm at right now, and some people would say, and I think some of that when I look at the Staleys, especially A.E. Staley, my desire to move and go forward. I planted a church 25 years ago, and in planting that church, you gotta have some tenacity. You got to be able to know that you're called. I always talk about the call. And so Mr. Staley must have had some kind of call. Maybe it was a different, maybe not spiritual, but a different call. But he had a call, and he chased that and continued, even in the ups and downs that I know about. And I'm sure I don't know very much of that. But what motivated him to move forward and to where we're at today in our country, the products that we have and the things that we have, there's probably not many homes, if any, in this country that somehow doesn't have a product that would trace back, if you trace the DNA all the way back to the A.E. Staley manufacturing. So
Absolutely. He did so many things for the food industry
Mm-hmm.
and agriculture that can be, traced back
Yeah.
to his ideas and his innovations. And a lot of other companies have come in and done more things and, continued to put out products that use that same kind
Right.
of thought, but it really did start in a lot of ways from what he had in his heart. And I know that his father, he really, of course, he was the oldest, so his father wanted him to be a minister, and that didn't seem like it was going down the road that he wanted. Although he went to church, they took him to church camp. The whole family went. This was where he actually found out about the soybean. That was where literally and figuratively the seed was planted. And maybe you can tell us a little bit about what that experience was.
Again, what I know, the hearsay and the stories that are passed on through generations, is there's a church still there today. It's Shiloh United Methodist today. Back in those days, it was Shiloh Methodist Church, and that was where the family went. And even on my mother's side of the family, that's where they went to church as well. And growing up there, but they had what we would call maybe a revival or a church camp or something of that nature. But there was a missionary that came from China and brought soybeans here. So the story goes that at that time, that was when soybeans were actually introduced here in our states, but in North Carolina. And soybean is a huge product in North Carolina, and it is in many other places, but there especially because it got its roots, so to say. It started that AE went home, maybe with his father, but had a pocket full of soybeans. And so the story goes, planted those soybeans and they took root. And the soybean product that we know today, many of us really do need to thank A.E. Staley Manufacturing, because the book that I've read about him and the stories that I've heard, there were many ups and downs in producing that product to where it became what it finally is today.
And that was part of his success, was the perseverance that he had and the determination that he had, because you're right, there were a lot of ups and downs. Really, any success story, if you go comb through it enough, you'll see that it wasn't just a straight trajectory up to the top. You have to, learn as you go along the way. And he sure did learn as he went, and had a lot of failures, complete failures, and he just picked right back up again and went on. And that is really the meaning of it all, is how well you could do that. And he probably learned that from working in those fields in North Carolina.
Probably so. It's not how many times you fall, it's that getting up the last time.
Exactly.
You got to get up one more time in order to, to have that success. So
exactly. One of the things that really knocked him down was the death of his father. He was 18 years old, and his father passes away, and now it is his job to take care of the family. And in the late 1800s, that was a pretty difficult time to be doing that. Any time is a difficult time to be doing that, but he had that responsibility, but he knew he couldn't do it as a farmer.
Right.
And he knew he had to get out and about. From growing up in that area, a lot of small towns, a lot of rural area there. So that had to be a real leap of faith to know that you were going to get out of that farm and make a living, because there weren't a lot of large cities in that area.
Well, the closest city to where he lived would have been 25 or 30 miles. And back in those days, that was a long distance, but that would have been Greensboro. And, he actually, one of the stories is told about him going up there to a retail business of Odell, I think is the name of it. And he was going to go and work there. And I think this, what I've heard and stories that have been passed on is he only worked there about a day. And the owner told him he needed to go back to the farm. He would never amount to a salesperson or any of that. And that probably lit the fire, probably made him more determined to get off and to be able to do it. I mean, farming was difficult. Farming still is today. And we have to thank the good Lord for the farmers we have today, this country and this world. And, but he wanted to make a way for the farmers to do better also with corn and soybean as it went forward after that. So, that drive to move, he knew that it was going to be difficult to take care of the family on that farm and especially to do any better. So motivating probably to look for some greener pastures.
Yes, and he definitely found them
Yes.
all eventually along the way. Yes, and then so important that we need to preserve this history, to tell these stories. We do have many businesses here in Decatur that help preserve history. And this is where we're going to put in a spot for viewing real estate. So then we will come back and we will talk again. And let me think here. Pick up where we're going to leave off there.
Watch the pig on the table.
Oh.
It's picking up on the mic.
Well, I'm glad we stopped then. Okay, thank you.
It's not bad.
Okay, thank you. All right. So telling these stories, carrying on this legacy has really been something that we've had a priority here, of course, at the Staley Museum. So we're really glad to have you here, Randy, and to be able to see these stories and see the family history and the family legacy. Tell me what it is like. I mean, I know you don't live in North Carolina now, but you do own part of the land that A.E. Staley grew up on, where you also grew up. But tell me what it is like there these days. Has it changed very much?
Well, the farm itself is still rented and tended by a farmer and a dairyman. There are two parts of that. The old home is still there, not near the condition that it should be in, but it's got a lot of years on it, and it's gone through, it's still pretty much the same. The farm, as it said, there's an old barn that used to be there, a log barn. Was large back, as a kid, it was really large. But anyway, there through a storm and a tree that fell on it, but someone bought the logs, and they have moved those logs probably about 7 or so miles away and completed a log house that they built and used those logs in it. And so they're there, and it was interesting about that. One of the things about my brother had shared with me that those logs, and I had not even paid any attention, but they were all Roman numeraled because they were hewed out and fixed at the sawmill and then brought in to put together. So you see some of that, but that's gone. But as far as the farm itself, it's still being farmed. It's not been turned into a housing development yet or any of that type of thing. And it's red dirt. I grew up there. I raised hogs when I was a teenager, and actually was able to buy my first car with some hog money that came off of that farm. But it was tough. So I can see how he would probably want to do something different.
Now, do you know, did they have livestock, a lot of livestock when he was there?
Yes, there was a dairy farm at one time, and it was, according to, again, we're many years beyond that, but it was really a state-of-the-art dairy farm that was there for that day and time. As a matter of fact, in an old, what we call the pump house there was 1,000-gallon water tank. Now, I know that doesn't sound like much to people, and I've seen this lake here at Decatur that Staley helped to get, and to build, but in our area, there was no other 1,000-gallon water tank, and it was there to help run the dairy. And it stayed until just a few years ago when my sister owned the old home place, and she finally sold it. And the gentleman that has it now tends the farm and stuff, but made some changes, and that was one of them. But for those many years, that dairy, and so again, back when my grandmother was living there, A.E.'s sister, he helped. He still sent. He didn't have an obligation there, but he still sent, money back to help that dairy to run. And the farm equipment, so the stories go, back in those days was some of the best. And but as time moved forward, things started changing.
Yeah, traditions change
Yeah.
too. We have a lot of businesses here in Decatur that like to help continue the tradition. One of them is the Staley Credit Union. And we're going to put in a commercial here for Staley Credit Union, and then we will come back and talk about. Oh wait, what was I going to say? I had it in my head. Okay. So once A.E. Staley's father died, William, when he passed away, A.E. Staley knew right away. I mean, he knew even before that he wasn't going to stay on the farm, that he was going to be a businessman. He had already tried to go out and sell, and he had been successful at selling some of their produce from the farm.
Mhm.
But once his father passed away, he knew that he couldn't stay on the farm to support the family, and he needed to go out and be a full-time salesman. So he left the farm to his brother, Arthur,
Mhm.
and Arthur ran that pretty much until he passed away. And that was before A.E. Staley died. A.E. Staley passed away in 1940. And then once Arthur passed away, the farm went on to one of his sisters. So you can pick up the story
Yeah.
from there.
Well, that would have been my grandmother,
Mhm.
and she was gone before I was born. So I never met my grandmother, just know the stories, some of those stories are there. And then my dad and my mother stayed there on the farm for years, helping her until she passed. And then somewhere in the process, and I wished I had better dates and times, but I think the story would best be told that Miss Staley, after A.E. passed away, somewhere in the process, she actually gave the farm to my mother and father. And so the story that's been passed on to me over the years was one year my mother received a deed to half of that farm in her name, didn't even have my father's name on it, in her name and her heirs. The next year, so the story goes, my father got the other half of the place in his name and his heirs. And my dad, all of those years, did not farm very much. We had large gardens. He would raise a garden big enough to feed half the county often, and he did. It was there. He didn't sell much out of the gardens. It was always, people could come and get it and give it away and things of that nature of generosity and giving and stuff. Because I'd often ask him, why are we planting such a big garden? Well, if it'll be enough for us in case something happens, that kind of thing, and to share, and he did. So that was a part of it as well, living on the farm that went forward. But the farm, all of my life, when I came along, it was rented out. To my knowledge, I never remember us as a family farming it anymore. Now, I remember working, getting hay up, and them soybeans that was planted and grown as a young man, teenager, when the farmers would bale the hay, and soybean is a very heavy bale of hay. I can tell you, heavier than any other crop that you can bale. And but we would do that, and I remember doing those kinds of things too on the farm.
Yeah, of course, that was what A.E. Staley chose or not really chose right off the bat. I mean, it just what came up from his experience and what he knew worked. And somehow that seed was literally and figuratively planted in him when he went to church camp,
Mm-hmm.
and the missionary introduced him to the soybeans.
Right.
So so you definitely have had that experience with soybeans on the farm. We have businesses too in Springfield and Decatur area in central Illinois that have experience in serving the community. The Brecknitz Group of Raymond James is one of those. And here we will put another, and then we'll just kind of wrap things up for this one, and then we'll do one more, probably a little shorter one, and then we'll be all done on there and good to go. Okay, let's see here. So after you've been here on this trip to Decatur, you've been able to see most of all of the sites that we can show you that have to do with A.E. Staley's history. And tell me what you'll be able to go back and share with the family and the people in the community that know this history in North Carolina and Virginia.
I don't know where I'll start. You have been with me now for a couple of days, you and Mark, and I can't say enough about how grateful I am for that. But also, you have noticed I do some Facebook Live and some things of that nature. Also, as a pastor, I have that, and people are watching some of those things. To go back and be able to share what I've learned here, I've been overwhelmed, and catching up to where it's at after this many years is a monumental task. To see this museum and to see all that's preserved here, all the work that you and others have done to preserve here is phenomenal. And this house on College Street here that Mr. A.E. Staley years ago dreamed of having, and it was their home, and now been turned into the museum, which is phenomenal. But then yesterday I had the privilege of going over to the A.E. Staley. I think the farmers called it the palace in the cornfield, but to see that today, it is lit up at night, and it's a phenomenal sight. So on my Facebook page and stuff of that nature, I'll be posting pictures and telling some of those stories. And and I go all the way back. I did a little video Facebook Live documentary yesterday of Decatur with the wall of the Staley Athletics,
The mural.
with the mural. And I did that timeline on got lots of hits on that and comments and stuff. But then to go to that office building, and people have said there might be some similarities. So I've got that DNA, some drive or whatever. I don't know about the looks or whatever, but you took a picture of me sitting under his portrait
In the lobby.
And
there is a resemblance there. Definitely.
And so many people have said that as well. And then the privilege of going up into his office and being there behind the desk and asking, could I sit at the chair where he was at? And it's kind of overwhelming. And especially last night, I had a chance to talk to my wife about it for a long time and think about those things. I'm just grateful today for, part of my family that I had nothing to do with, but it is a part of the DNA and the family tree and things of that nature, to see what kind of phenomenal contribution this A.E. Staley had in our country. It still is overwhelming. And now that I'm here, so unfortunately, I may have the gift. I'm a pastor. I may have the gift sometimes to talk too much. And if anybody will listen, I will have stories to tell.
You do have great story. I mean, you really know how to share the word with people and uplift people. So we have been very uplifted to have you here, and we are going to keep you here for a little bit longer. And we're going to have a second part for our podcast. So our next episode will also have Randy, and we're going to talk a little bit more about A.E. Staley, about the farm that he grew up on, and what he was thinking on that farm that got him out of there and into Decatur, and how all of that history happened. So that will be next time on our podcast. We want to thank our partners, the Herald and Review, First Mid Insurance Group, and McGuire, Huffman, Uhas, and Buckley. They all have helped contribute to us. Also, Buick Real Estate, Staley Credit Union, and the Brecknitz Group of Raymond James are sponsors. We will be back with you for our next podcast, part 2, with Randy Garner. I'm Julie Staley. Have a wonderful day. Thanks for being with us on The Seed.